One day in late 1864, a young man named Robert was waiting on a train platform in Jersey City. It was late, it was crowded, he was waiting in line to buy his ticket when suddenly he got shoved up against the body of the train. At that moment, the train started to move. Robert lost his balance, he got twisted, and he fell feet first into the gap between the train and the platform. Robert was stuck. He couldn't pull himself out. He would have been killed, or at the very least horribly injured, if it weren't for a complete stranger who, at that moment, grabbed him by the coat collar, pulled him out of the gap, and dragged him back onto the platform. As Robert regained his bearings and turned around to thank the man who saved his life, he recognized the man immediately. Why? Because the man who rescued him was a celebrity. His name was Edwin, and he was considered the greatest actor of his generation. Now, just how famous was Edwin? It was so famous that if you look up Hamlet on Wikipedia, it's his photo that appears next to the article. He was so famous that he was the very first actor ever to have a Broadway theater named after him, a theater that still bears his name to this day. In other words, everyone knew who he was. It would have been like if Leonardo DiCaprio had saved your life. Not only that, but Edwin was from a famous family of actors. His father was an actor, his brothers were actors, but everyone knew that Edwin was the greatest of them all. In fact, just a few months earlier, he and his brothers had performed in a charity performance of Julius Caesar at the Winter Garden Theater, and it was the social event of the season. Edwin played Brutus, his older brother played Cassius, and his younger brother, who wasn't the greatest actor but was considered the most handsome, played Mark Antony. The money they raised from that performance went to erecting the Shakespeare statue that still stands in Central Park to this day. Shortly after that performance of Julius Caesar, Edwin and his younger brother had a falling out over politics, something that I'm sure none of us here in America can relate to today, and Edwin kicked his younger brother out of the house. But anyway, back to the train platform in New Jersey. Robert, completely starstruck, thanks the famous actor who saved his life, and Edwin goes about his day. Now, this next part of the story you probably know. Edwin's younger brother, the not-so-talented one that he kicked out of the house, a few months later snuck into the back of Ford's Theater and shot and killed the President of the United States. And as he fired his gun, he shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, as Brutus famously shouted when he assassinated Julius Caesar. As you can imagine, Edwin was devastated. He couldn't believe that his own brother had done this horrific thing. He was disgusted by his brother's actions. Edwin was a unionist. He didn't agree with his brother's politics at all. But at the same time, it was still his brother. Not only that, but the family name was ruined. Suddenly, Edwin wasn't the most famous brother anymore. Edwin announced that, in penance for his brother's sins, he, the most famous and beloved actor of his generation, was going to retire from the stage permanently. He was inconsolable. But during this time, Edwin received a letter from a friend who had happened to serve in the military alongside Robert. Remember the young man from the train platform that he rescued that day? Robert had recounted this story of how Edwin saved his life to this mutual friend, and this friend wanted to pass along the story to Edwin. You see, Abraham and Mary Todd had 4 children. Of those 4 children, only one of them survived to adulthood. That man that Edwin saved on the platform that day, that wasn't just anyone. That was Robert Lincoln, President Lincoln's only surviving son. The knowledge that Edwin had saved the president's only surviving son was one of the only things that gave him comfort during this time in his life. And shortly after hearing this news, he finally gained the courage and the strength to return to the stage. It is hard for me to even get through this story without crying. To quote Shakespeare, if this were played upon a stage now, I could condemn it as an improbable fiction. But honest to God, this really happened. And now you know the true story of the time that Booth saved Lincoln.